an intellectual. I know that sounds, he was not. Spoiler, he was not, right? You know, right? But people in North Korea, they were told that, you know, healthcare, that nobody has healthcare in the United States, and people are living on the streets, and that's not true. It's just that's not an accurate picture of what life in the United States is like. But he was able to maintain that lie because there weren't sources of information outside of his control. And when I saw Bitcoin, what I saw was that we had something similar happen in finance. If you look at Venezuela, there is no alternative to using the state currency, and the state can devalue that currency, and they can essentially take money out of the pockets of anyone they want to. Financial systems in many countries are used as sort of roadblocks. They're used as choke points to prevent people from getting. Many of you may know that cannabis businesses that are legal on the state level and illegal on the federal level have difficulty getting access to banking because it's illegal on the federal level. Like the federal government is using its control over the financial system to exert leverage. And whether you think that leverage is correct or not, you certainly, I hope, would agree that there are governments that, you know, of repressive countries that are using that leverage in bad ways. And so the technology that I saw in Bitcoin had the potential to democratize the movement of money the same way the internet democratized the movement of information. And that was tremendously exciting to me. And the analogy I use sometimes is the Ford Model T. Like people saw the Ford Model T, and if you were a visionary, you could say, oh my God, this is going to replace the horse. But not literally the Model T. Like, anyone here drive a Model T? If so, I'm jealous of you, but right? Like, the technology, you could look at the Model T and say, you know, it's expensive, it's slow, it needs maintenance frequently, but like none of those things are fundamental to the technology. Those are just limitations of the technology today. And I started to look at Bitcoin and I said, well, what are the limitations of the technology? And there really weren't that many. Scalability was probably like the only one just the work they're working on. That, like other than that, it just seemed like this technology could be really transformative in a number of businesses. And then we had the crypto winter when the price of Bitcoin and other cryptographic assets dropped down. It's like, oh, that's over. But you know, we had a dot-com boom followed by a dot-com bust. Does anyone think the internet's over? Like, you know, some of those companies rebounded a little bit, and the bad ideas got shut down. And I think that's kind of happening in the crypto space too. The bad ideas are getting shaken out. But I also just want to say one other thing, which is like one of the reasons that I come to university is because this is a super exciting space, and it's cross-disciplinary. Information science, computer science, cryptography is obvious, but then like finance and governance and politics, and there are all these other aspects of what blockchain is going to do. How do you govern a blockchain system? Like, there's all kinds of interesting questions in this space, and if we want to advance this space, like the internet was something that a lot of the greatest minds of a generation worked on, and we have the internet because of that. And I want to see those minds working in the blockchain space. And I want to let you know that, like, even though the cryptocurrency prices have dropped, there are still large numbers of companies, my own Ripple included, that are building in this space that are trying to figure out how to, you know, bring this technology to mass adoption. And it's just an incredibly exciting space to research and work in.
And by the way, the winter is good because they told me in the business school you should buy low and sell high. So it's buy time.
Well, one of the things that sometimes I'll hear people say is like this pattern has repeated 4 times, and every time it like immediately set new highs. That's true until it isn't. You know, there's no one of the first things you learn when anyone talks about any investment is to say that there's no guarantee that the future will look like the past. But I mean, the best data we have on what the future is going to look like is the past. So it's kind of torn. Is this the last? Is it not? I mean, yeah, who knows, right? So don't all go out and buy Bitcoin. That's not what we're trying to say here.
We'll edit out of it. So share with us, what is Ripple's vision? What kind of problems are you trying to solve?
I think you could look at it at multiple levels. I think kind of like the high-level visionary statement is we want money to move the way information does. We talk about the internet of value. We want money to be. If I want to send you an email, I just ask you what your email address is. I don't ask what mail service you use or what internet service provider you are. I don't have to worry about any of that stuff. But if I want to send you money, it's a huge mess. PayPal and Venmo are owned by the same company and they don't interoperate. Seriously, I'm not kidding. They're owned by the same company. They're both US dollar domestic payments, among other things. They only interoperate as US dollar domestic payment systems. Like that's ridiculous. So that's kind of like our broad vision. Our shorter-term vision is to find the problem that we can solve that has the best product market fit. Because like that's a huge problem, right? There's no way that you can try to get, like, do we try to make PayPal and Venmo interoperate? Like, is that what we're about? Like, how do you fix that? I think the short term, we picked what we think is the low-hanging fruit, which is international payments, cross-currency payments. Anyone who's ever made one will tell you they're terrible today. One of the biggest problems is nobody knows where the money's going to go until the payment's finished. They just sort of push it, and then it takes a few hops, and eventually it gets to the recipient where there's an error along the way, but nobody knows the rate because they don't know the path it's going to take. So our shorter-term goal is to remove friction from international payments, and we've been building a payment and settlement network that we call RippleNet for banks and financial institutions to do that and to allow them to settle with a cryptocurrency. And that's kind of like our shorter-term vision. But there's another important piece too that I think is lost on a lot of people. I'll use the same analogy that I like to use a lot. Like, imagine if you were the CEO of Twitter in 1996. Now there was no Twitter in 1996, so this is a pure thought experiment. You'd be like, oh my God, people need better phones. And everybody else would be like, wait, what? Like, you're not in the phone business, you're a website. Why do people need better phones? Like, trust me, no. If I'm going to get mass adoption, people have to have much, much better phones than they have today. And you would be right about that. Like, there has to be an entire ecosystem. And so what Ripple has recognized is that we can't build an ecosystem all by ourselves. So we need to encourage people to build useful projects, do research in the space, and sort of grow the space as a whole. And if you look at the cryptocurrency markets, which I encourage you not to do, but if you do, you'll notice that cryptocurrencies are very, very highly correlated. They tend to go up together or go down together. And what I think that means, but again, to the extent that anyone knows what anything means, like, what I think that means is that people believe that this space is kind of either going to succeed or fail. They don't think they can pick the winners in the space. Like, if I thought search was going to be like, people are never going to be able to find things on the internet. Search is the next best thing. Okay, but is it Google, Lycos, Excite, AltaVista, Ask Jeeves? Like, how the heck would I know? I have to look at great detail at all those projects, and even then, because, you know, Lycos might be on top today, does that mean Google isn't going to come up with better technology tomorrow? It's like, it's hard to pick the winners inside the space. So we want like the whole ecosystem to grow. We want the whole space to succeed. And so right now we're building out we're continuing to build out that network for banks and financial institutions and large corporates. And then we're trying to sort of grow the ecosystem so that we solve the technological problems that we have. And we have all the pieces that Ripple can't build. Ripple cannot build a whole new financial system. We just can't.
And you know, and that's very refreshing because we cannot always at this early stage pick the winners and losers. So you want all boats to rise. So you know, most people who follow cryptocurrencies realize that we have cryptocurrencies and we have the ledger that stores all the transactions. So one of the questions, David, I wanted to ask you was, if you look at Ripple and XRP and look at the ledger underlying it, what kind of improvements have you made to the Bitcoin blockchain or the Bitcoin ledger?
Well, so in the very beginning, we built a federated, what engineers and computer scientists would call a federated Byzantine agreement model instead of proof of work. And one of the first challenges that we had after we said, like, can we actually make this work? I'm like, okay, we can make this work. But the next challenge was like, what is it good for? What can it do better than existing? You know, if you invented a new material, but it was really heavy, really expensive, it rusted really easily, it wasn't very strong, you'd be like, cool, we built a new material, like, now let's go build something else, right? So it's like, it had certain characteristics, and we're like, what problems can it solve that proof of work maybe isn't as good at solving because of those different characteristics? And the first thing that we hit on was a cross-currency system. So one of the big differences between federated Byzantine agreement and mining is when you mine, in a proof of work system, the miner who mines a particular block gets to choose every transaction in that block. So they're the sort of dictator of the moment. And they're completely self-interested. They're not trying to help you out, right? They're trying to help themselves out. So now imagine if you had like the New York Stock Exchange and a different self-interested party ran it for every 10 minutes. Boy, that would look a lot different than the New York Stock Exchange. So what we thought was, we don't have a dictator. Every transaction is voted on by a majority, and that majority is selected for the fact that they pick transactions in an unbiased way. Like if someone picks transactions in a biased way, you just stop listening to them. And so we thought, what can we target? And we thought we could target an exchange system where people want to trade one currency or one asset for another. And so we built the ledger from the beginning as a multi-currency ledger. And I think that we built in peer-to-peer credit and lending, so like I can extend credit to people and they can sort of draw on that. And I think that's probably the key difference. I would say one other difference that is Bitcoin uses, I don't want to get too technical, but Bitcoin, the transactions are the primary thing. Like the ledger in Bitcoin is a set of transactions. They call them UTXOs, unspent transaction outputs. Ripple's ledger design is a collection of accounts with balances, much more like a traditional bank. There are advantages and disadvantages of both approaches, but one of the big advantages of an account approach is, like, let's say you're a charity and you've told people to send payment to a particular Bitcoin address. Let's say you have somebody who processes those payments for you. You want to change who processes them. Like, I don't want this guy to process them, I want some other guy to process them. You actually have to change your receiving address. You have to give everybody a new address to send money to, because the other guy, the guy you don't want to use anymore, has the keys to that address. When you have an account on a ledger, that account has properties and you can change them. So one property can be who can sign for that account. You could actually change it without having to move funds or give a new receiving address. And so some of the properties that we added to the ledger were built around those two fundamental differences. The fact that you don't have a dictator at the moment, and the fact that you have an account that you can manage, and that led to some other design decisions down the road. But that's sort of the core of the differences.
Well, that's very cool, actually. So I want to take one of the things you said about Ripple supporting multiple currencies. So within the account context, I personally think that'd be very useful. How does that work?
Well, it's actually, it's a little complicated. I try to think of a way to simplify it. And it's interesting that I can sort of use some of the new terminology that we have now to describe it, but that kind of gives you the technology, but not the spirit. So the technology, so to give you the technology side, if you have an account on the XRP ledger, which you can do just by having some XRP, you can issue an asset denominated in any denomination you want. So I can say, and you can think of it as an IOU. You can say, I owe you $100. Now, if there are people who owe me money and people I owe money to, that can be used as those IOUs can circulate as currency. It works the same way a check does. Like if I want to pay you money and I give you a check, you could theoretically say, yeah, I have a check from David for $50. He's paid me, everything is settled. But you don't want me to owe you $50. Like you want your bank to owe you $50. So what you do is you take that bank and you give it to some system that processes it. And what happens is somebody winds up owing me $50 less, like my bank, and somebody winds up owing you $50 more, your bank. And then it's all magically settled inside. That magical settlement inside we built into the XRP ledger from day one. And so what that allows you to do is that allows you to have dollars that are an actual legal obligation on the ledger. There are companies, Bitstamp and GateHub are examples. You send them dollars in the real world, you actually wire money to them or however you do it, and they push a dollar balance on the ledger to you. And if you trust Bitstamp or GateHub and they owe you money, you can give that IOU back to them and they'll wire you money in the physical world. And now let's say you don't want to do business with GateHub or Bitstamp, you're not in the same jurisdiction as them, it doesn't matter. That digital asset will be worth $1 to people who do business with them. So you can use it as a payment asset, you can accept it in payment, you can trade it for other assets, just as if you did do business with GateHub or Bitstamp. And you have your choice of which assets you want to use. And we built an exchange in, so you have an order book with buy and sell offers to trade one asset for another. And the last thing that we added, which I think is incredibly cool, is pathfinding. So if you have some asset, let's say you have dollars that Bitstamp owes you, and you want to use them to pay XRP to someone, if you buy down the order book, like if there's a juicy offer at the top, but as you go further down the order book, the offers get progressively worse and worse. You're buying down that order book. What you can do is you can specify a sort of multiple path payment that buys down one order book and then goes to some other path. So if you have dollars issued by Bitstamp, maybe someone's willing to trade that for XRP, but maybe someone's willing to trade that for Bitcoin and someone's willing to trade those Bitcoins for XRP, or you can take multiple paths on a single payment. And I think that's kind of how we built that multi-currency asset. And that's where you definitely don't want a dictator who controls the system.
No, the way I'm thinking about it, it actually gives you flexibility. And you don't know what kind of financial assets or digital assets or instruments people might create in the future that could still work on this ledger.
So here's the depressing part. So we built that in 2012 and introduced it to the public, and we had exactly the excitement that you just, and I thought, wow, like this is super cool. And I thought of all these amazing use cases, like peer-to-peer lending and social credit and all those things. And now, fast forward to today, what percentage of asset movements on the XRP ledger do you think are these kinds of assets? It's like 0.2%.
Why is that?
I think the idea is way ahead of its time. I hope that's the reason. I hope it's not that it's a bad idea. I accept the possibility. It could just be a terrible idea. I think it's a great idea. I think it's still ahead of its time. So all that capability is still there in the XRP ledger. There are still people who use it. There are a lot of people who think it's the coolest thing. I had dinner with someone last night who didn't know any of this. I was like, wow, that's super cool. And I'm like, well, then here's the depressing part. I told exactly what I just told you. That's all there, and I hope that people find something exciting in it, but has not happened yet.
So, so in this room, we will stipulate that that's a good idea, it's just ahead of its time.
$8 million a day was being traded. I don't know by who or for what in this way. It was moving around on the ledger during like a year and a half ago. $8 million a day, and now it's down to something like $300,000 a day. And again, I don't know who's doing it or what they're using it for. So I don't know whether it was cryptocurrency related in the crypto winter, or they found better. Maybe it was remittances and they found other ways to do it, or I don't know. But it is a little depressing.
You know, sometimes when you're in there and you see everything, it can be depressing. But my usual approach is to not lose the optimism of the idea and the vision. And that's gonna be my advice to everyone over there.
I still hope it's ahead of its time. I talk to people about it, and we're hearing some projects that are interested in using stuff for it, but again, product market fit's tough, and we'll see.
Actually, that's a good segue to my next question. So what interesting use cases are you seeing out there for ledgers, for distributed ledgers, for crypto, outside of the payment arena?
So that's unfortunately, again, it's a little depressing. The further you get away from payments, the poorer with today's technology the product market fit is. But you know, like if I drove here in a Model T and we couldn't visualize, you know, trucks and sports cars and SUVs, and we have a Model T today, and we want to replace the horse. So we have a lot of work to do. So payments is the obvious slam dunk. International payments, payment areas where there's tremendous friction is the obvious. Then there's like really directly affiliated use cases, things like lending, things like trade finance, things that are really closely connected to finance, maybe settling securities trades. But then as you get further away, people talk about like avocado farmers or provenance of art, and all those things are interesting, but it's much harder to see product market fit. I have to do this terrible thing. So when people ask for a use case, what they want to hear is like a specific, like this person has this need and this product satisfies it. And I have to do this cheater answer where I say, anytime you need, and then I list the characteristics of the technology. Not cheating, because that's not a use case.
Right? That's value.
But the answer is sort of any time where you need a system, but you don't want to pick someone to run it. Like there's advantages to the management being decentralized. There's advantages to the data being fundamentally public. There's advantages to nobody having control over how the system runs. Like where those, and the obvious ones of those are where money is involved because people are in different jurisdictions. But the other thing is also any case where like you would benefit from having a perfect legal system. So like a perfect legal system would have no cases. If I ripped you off for $100 and we went to a perfect legal system, they would make you pay me. I would make you pay you the $100 plus cost. So I would just give you the $100 and not bother. Like any case where you want to kind of build a sort of perfect legal system and where it fits. But unfortunately, a hard time with use case fit. I'm very bullish on the technology because I think that compared, and everybody says, why wouldn't you just use a centralized database? Well, they imagine that centralized databases are cheap and reliable. That is nonsense. Every major centralized database has downtime. No major blockchain has had any downtime in the past 3 years. Centralized databases are cheap. Go to any pharmaceutical companies went to companies to run a centralized database for them to move vaccines, and they were quoted many millions of dollars a year.
But like anyone who tells me a centralized database is cheap, I give them a picture of Larry Ellison's young.
Right. Exactly.
Definitely not cheap.
These earlier tech, these are being oversold. We're being told that like, oh, it's just really simple to bring a conventional database. It's not. And the security is critical too. So I think the key insight of blockchain is every participant can verify every system state transition. Anytime the database goes from state A to state B, every participant who wants to can verify that state transition. And even more importantly, the only way to go from state A to state B is to demonstrate that that transition like complies with the system's rules. When you operate a centralized system, huge amounts of the costs are built around making sure that bad data doesn't get into the system, making sure that the data doesn't get corrupted. If you can't pass corrupt data on, that whole operational cost center and risk center goes away. Now that's not to say that blockchains don't have any security problems. I don't want to oversell blockchains. But that's like why I'm super excited about the space, even though we don't quite have this product market fit. It's very early days. We have a Model T, or it's early days of the internet. I have a modem that cost me $300, and I'm editing DOS batch files to get a text-based, get FTP.
And you have 480 kilobytes of RAM.
Right. It's early days, but it's super exciting, and so I want to get people excited into the space. But I'll be very honest about what we can't do today. Like we don't have the slam dunk see-through to putting everything on the blockchain. And probably some things won't work well on the blockchain. Like I'm not arguing that it will do everything. I'm just arguing it can do a lot more than we're using it for as we grow the technology because a lot of limitations are not fundamental.
So if, a lot of people talk about this, for example, Jamie Dimon will say, I think he doesn't say this anymore, but he says, crypto is crap, but he likes to ledger. So I want to get your point of view on, is that separable, the currency, the token, and the ledger, or they kind of go hand in hand?
So right now, these financial use cases are the ones that seem like the best product market fit. They're the ones that are getting the most traction. Will it turn out that they, I think there's a fundamental reason for that, which is that people want control over the flow of money. I think people are not happy with the fact that the control over funds is being used as sort of a tool to control people. And if they don't have to have gatekeepers to the financial system, they don't have to have gatekeepers to information, and so they tore down the old walls. They built new ones, so maybe, at least he's bullish on the technology, so I'll say that's a plus. I'll take that as a plus, but I also think that there are a lot of financial system problems with this setup. I mean, if you look at we had a revolution in the movement of goods. We had, shipping, we had the shipping container, which don't underestimate how revolutionary that was. Like, that's what started like globalization of like farming. And then we had a revolution in the internet where we can move information. Well, what's the piece that's missing is the movement of money. If I can find out what goods you have for sale and you can get those goods to me, I gotta pay you. Like, that is a huge missing piece. And I know he's in a position where his revenue model is based on the money moving through him, and some of it sort of doesn't quite get from the source to destination. I think that just like the New York Times probably wasn't big on the internet in the early days, So I mean, it's going to take some time for the people who benefit from the way the system is, and maybe he's right. Maybe the use cases will be elsewhere. It doesn't look like that today, though. At least not from my point of view.
No, I don't think so. I mean, there were those when the PC came out. There were those who owned the mini computer business that said there's no need for PCs. And when the mini computer came out, those that owned the mainframe said there was no need for mini computers. So we've seen that history repeat itself over and over again, and I feel like that's going to be in that mode that this happens.
Sony was probably not big on the iPod.
Sony? Oh yeah, that's a company. Yeah, that's a music company.
Yeah, but you see the example here. So like the iPod came out of a computer company. Why? It could have come from Sony, but it didn't. Sony could have embraced digital downloads. The iPod could have been a Sony product. They could have been a big player in the digital music space. But that's not what happened. Apple was a computer company, and they saw digital downloads happening, and they embraced it when the original music company was like, we really understand how to sell physical CDs. We really understand how to sell physical records and tapes. That's our business. And people seem to like it. So why would we try to do something else that's not our business? Well, people stopped liking it, didn't they? Yeah. I'm pretty sure a lot more people in this room have buy digital downloads than buy CDs or tapes or records. Probably a couple of you buy records because apparently that's coming back. But
yeah, vinyl's coming back, I heard. Just like bell bottoms. So they were turning to, like, say, recent news. In the, I don't know where it was, but HTC announced a new phone, their Exodus, and they have a crypto wallet. Give us your kind of thinking around, what are they thinking, and how could this help us grow the ecosystem?
Well, people laugh when they want a blockchain phone, and honestly, that was like my first reaction. But it was a famous executive at Microsoft who once said, "Who wants a phone shaped like a slice of toast?" Well, my phone is shaped like a slice of toast. This is exactly the form factor that he was mocking, and it's the most popular form factor today. I bet probably 80% of you have a phone shaped like a slice of toast. And at one time, when the first internet-connected phones came out, they were like, why would you want a phone connected to the internet? What sense does that make? I'm wary of saying that I don't see the fit, because people in the past who haven't seen the track record of people, shaking their fists at the sky that way is not so good. So I'm enthusiastic. I'm excited to see those kinds of developments. I don't think we're ready for mass retail adoption. Like, bluntly, I think we need to build a much stronger ecosystem before we're ready to do that. But I don't want to discourage the people who think we are, because if I'm wrong and I discourage them, that'd be a terrible thing. That would be great. There's going to be some path to mass adoption. It's just very hard to see right now. We're still very early.
So, what do you feel are the research problems? We have some students who, if people are looking at research problems to solve,
There are a lot. There are a lot. That's one of the reasons why I'm here. So one of them is quantum computing. Quantum computing is threatening the algorithms that blockchains use, and the current crop of quantum-resistant algorithms is not very good for blockchains. We'd use them if we had to, but we'd be very sad about that. We'd like to have algorithms that are really good for our use case. We don't have them. Governance is really weird in these systems. How does Bitcoin governance work? Well, we didn't know until someone tried to change the block size, right? And we had a sort of bit of a holy war and a split and about, like, we'd like to understand, how do you govern these kinds of systems? Who holds the real, like, what do you have to do to get a change through? Like, who has to agree? Who are the real stakeholders? Where is the value tied? And we don't understand any of that. Zero knowledge proofs have made possible many use cases that blockchains couldn't target. We've developed fundamentally new cryptographic primitives in just the last couple of years in this area. It's tremendously exciting and powerful. And we need more of it, like, because this is enabling us to target use cases that we didn't think we could target. And I would say also distributed agreement algorithms. Scalability also. Scalability is a big one. Like, if we could, there are a number of projects out looking at scaling blockchains in a number of different ways, and they're all interesting. But it would be not, the holy grail would be one thing that's just like, you just do this and your blockchain becomes scalable. Like, that would be fantastic. I don't know that that exists. But we need better, we need better suggestions in that direction. But I would also add that, like, I'm a technical person, and so I see sort of like the crypto side and some of the governance stuff. But there's issues on the financial side and legal, regulatory, like, who are the good guys and bad guys? How do you tell the difference? There's all kinds of questions about, like, what are the effects that this has on society? How do we prevent new gatekeepers from emerging? Like, privacy is a good example. Like, people say they care about privacy, but we built an ecosystem where privacy is terrible. Well, how do we not repeat that kind of mistake? Like, what do we have? How do we know? What are the early signs? What could we have done better? There's cross-disciplinary research needed everywhere in this entire space, and I can only tell you the ones that, like, impact what I'm doing directly. So don't let that discourage you and think if, like, something didn't seem important to me, it's not important. Like, we need everything. I can't imagine any discipline that this doesn't touch.
So David, you talked about characteristics of use cases. Can I also ask you to talk about characteristics of governance that you think would help with adoption, would help with?
So this is an extremely interesting situation because there's no coercion. Nobody has a legal right to run these systems any particular way. The governance emerges from the code people choose to run. So for example, when Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash split, you would wind up on Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash depending on what code you chose to run on your computer. And so you picked a side, or you picked both sides. But then the economic value of those systems kind of divided somehow, and we don't really know how. So, like, if you want to make a change to a system, these systems are going to have to make changes. If these systems can never make changes, they're going to be vulnerable to technological obsolescence. And I think that that could be one way. Like, Bitcoin might stay relevant until some technology is so much better than Bitcoin that Bitcoin dies. And Bitcoin can't change because people are so invested in the stability of the system. Like, Bitcoin's value is that it will work next year the same way it works today, and so they can't change, and so they die from, like, technological obsolescence. But that's kind of depressing, especially if you own a bunch of Bitcoin, right? Like, that's kind of, but it seems like you should be able to, like, innovate without disrupting, without being incredibly disrupted. And not every change is going to be non-controversial. So who are the stakeholders? How do you get there? Do you have a foundation? Do you have one guy who's like the benevolent dictator or a panel of people? Like, that worked well for Bitcoin until it didn't. So, like, is that a good model where there's, like, this person that everybody trusts? Like, well, what if you can't, like, even if that's the best model, like, you're not always going to find that person. Bitcoin doesn't have anybody in that role anymore. And so how can we keep these public systems accessed by people in different jurisdictions? I struggle for answers. So right now, it's basically almost just a fight. Like, someone proposes a change, and some people make the change, and some don't, and the network either splits or doesn't. Exchanges hold a lot of power today, but they don't want to wield it. Exchanges sometimes have no choice. Like in the Bitcoin Cash code, some exchanges said, like, we'll support both coins. Well, that's great, or not. Some of the value of these systems comes from the fact that you can reach all the other people on that system. So I'm not an expert in this. I don't know how, I always find the problems hardest that I don't know how to solve, and I always find problems inside the disciplines that I'm knowledgeable in to be easier because I can kind of see how you would solve them. I'm told that they're actually experts in this, and that they, I want to find them. One analogy, one discipline that might be closely related is open source projects. So Linux, like Linus Torvalds can say what Linux is, but he can't stop me from developing a branch of Linux that I call something else. And if I get a lot of traction because people like my branch, then maybe more developers will move and maybe his branch will die. And maybe like Linux might be a terrible example because that's had one person who's had everybody's respect and has run the project, but there are other projects that haven't been that way. It's looking at how did power transition in those projects, what kind of governance structures did they use, did they create foundations, what are the learnings, how did that work, how Bitcoin created a foundation, how did that work, how did it not? But I don't know. That's why I find these problems so interesting.
No, they are interesting, and in some sense, sometimes, you know, the word governance conjures up centralization for people.
Because it historically always has.
It historically always has been.
That's what makes it so weird.
Yeah, and when you look at it in this decentralized world,
nobody has a stick, right? If somebody has a stick, then the stick guy decides how we make the rules, but nobody has a stick.
If I was in my very first job, many decades ago, my boss told me his boss's boss was known as the benevolent dictator. And he was lying about one of those adjectives, but he didn't tell me which one.
I'm pretty sure it's not dictator.
So
yeah, that's not a great model. Like a lot of projects start out that way because there's someone who everybody agrees like has the project's best interest because they're aligned. But as it starts to get value or target different use cases in this Discord, like the ability of a single person to hold everybody's respect or
it's impossible for a long period of time.
right. So we need to have something to go to, and the sort of everybody for themselves, just whatever happens, happens. Maybe that is the best solution. Maybe we can't do any better than what Bitcoin has. I don't know. I tend to think that.
No, I think that's still an open question.
I would agree with you. So
I
what does
wanted
decentralized governance look like? That oxymoron.
So I wanted to leave some time for questions from you all. What kind of questions do you all have bubbling up as you listen to this conversation play out in front of you and as you kind of see the world of cryptocurrencies happen? Yes, John.
Actually, a question for David. What do you see the differences between asset issuance on other platforms like Ethereum and asset issuance on Ripple?
So asset issuance on the XRP ledger didn't really take off. It was our early strategy. Ripple as a company kind of abandoned that strategy as we pursued other things, and it didn't really take off. Through our spring effort, we're sort of revisiting whether that makes sense, whether we want like stable coins or one interesting thing is trustless gateways, so that you can have a token that lives on more than one ledger without having to trust somebody to hold it. I think it's kind of good that the XRP ledger sort of sat out the ICO boom bust cycle. I think it was kind of damaging to the Ethereum ecosystem that they had issues where the blockchain became completely congested and unusable because like CryptoKitties caught on and some of these projects were ill thought out. I think that ecosystem has matured, but I think like it's interesting that we didn't go through that sort of stress period. There's nobody who's actively working to encourage token issuance on the XRP ledger, really, because there isn't really a good use case fit. So it's available. You can if you have some XRP, you can issue an asset on the XRP ledger immediately. People can hold it and you can trade it and do anything you want with it. But there's a dearth of use cases right now, and we're looking for people who are interested in use cases, and we do hear those we do have people who approach us. They're talking about like maybe we'll issue securities on the ledger and we'll tokenize them that way, or maybe we'll do our next an ICO that way. Maybe stable coins I think are probably the use case that I can see the clearest line to. But I don't know. It's kind of depressing to me because I think we built this really cool system that supports this trading and issuing of assets, and it's just there's no good use case. Again, I like to think it's ahead of its time. Right.
Yes.
So how does PolySign plan on solving the current issues with digital asset custody? For example, the cryptographic key unlocks access to all funds. Once the secret's stolen or lost, once it never be recovered.
God, I really wish I could answer that, but I'm under a non-disclosure agreement with PolySign, and because they're in stealth mode right now, I don't know what I'm allowed to tell you.
Okay.
I can tell you that they're in the custody business, and of course I can tell you that they're doing it like an amazing way that, Arthur and I are behind these, we're the lead guys on the technology, and obviously like we're doing it, we think we're doing it right, but unfortunately, I don't know yet. I really wish I could tell you because it's so freaking cool. I'm busting with wanting to tell people what we did, and they're like, oh no, it's still, we're still in step mode, it's still not disclosure, so unfortunately I cannot answer that question.
I guess can I ask one more? I guess in in the cryptographic valuation model, since Susan after he published high estimate for assumed XRP adoption, Forex trading said was 3% of global Forex. Like, do you believe that's a high estimate, or what do you think of that?
This is an answer that I'll be completely honest, because obviously I would like to say that I like to think that it could take over the world.
Sure.
But in my heart of hearts, I believe that these prices are rational. I know that sounds crazy, but in my heart of hearts, I believe that if this price was really, if the price of any digital asset was really irrational, there are billionaires who have access to the cryptocurrency market. If the price of any cryptocurrency didn't accurately reflect its long-term prospects, why wouldn't some billionaire buy a crap ton of it, and bid the price up? I can't wrap my head around how these markets could really be irrational. I'm not an economist, and there are people who tell me that I'm out of my mind about that, but that is true, and I recognize I'm opining outside of my area of expertise, but that is really, in my heart of hearts, what I believe. I believe these markets have to be rational because I don't see, not necessarily that every spike is rational, there aren't pump and dumps or fake volume, not that everything, but that the course pricing has to be rational. How could it not be? Come on. And so if Bitcoin had a 2% chance of taking over $1 trillion of the economy, or XRP had a 50% chance of getting 6% of the forex market, how could it be that some billionaire isn't like, oh yeah, I see that, and buying billions of dollars? There's enough money, there's enough self-interested people who have access to the markets. I can't believe, again, I'm not an economist, and so I'm explicitly warning you, this is just how I as a non-expert feel. I cannot make myself believe that the prices are fundamentally irrational.
Thank you. Other questions for David? I'll go here and then come back.
So if I'm a payment transfer company and I'm integrating with, say, XRapid, can you describe a little bit kind of where is the line in the business logic between if I'm hooked up and XRapid's trying to find me liquidity providers and all these pathways you mentioned, is that something that I'm doing on my end, or is that something the network does? Where is that line between myself as a company and then XRapid, the network?
So I'll start from the bottom tier up, because there's a couple of tiers in the way it functions. So at the bottom tier, there's somebody who has, let's say we're going US dollars to Mexican pesos. There's someone who has dollars in exchange. They buy XRP, they send it to a Mexican exchange, they sell XRP, and then some payout company makes a payment through the Mexican domestic financial system. The XRapid customer, if you're the actual person who signed a contract with Ripple, you're an XRapid customer, you own those exchange accounts and that relationship with the payment provider. That's yours. So you now have the ability to make payments out in Mexico using liquidity sourced on demand. That's an ability that you have. You can, in principle, do whatever you want with that. Using that, so that's the second tier. Now the third tier is, let's say I'm a bank, and I can't hold XRP. It's just it's infeasible for me from a regulatory standpoint. However, if I want to make a payment, and I have US dollars and I want to make a payment in Mexican pesos, you could say, I'll give you those pesos. I don't have to care how you get them. The fact, in most regulatory environments, I have to know that you're regulated, that you're not, getting them from North Korea or something. But in general, it's not a big deal for me to get Mexican pesos from another institution that happened to trade a digital asset to get those Mexican pesos. Because today, if I send Mexican pesos, my bank has no idea those Mexican pesos are going to be delivered anyway. So you can go to other RippleNet customers who are probably not XRapid customers and aren't interested in being XRapid customers, and you can resell your US to Mexico pipeline to them, and you just give them a quote. So I'm making a payment to Mexico, I push it out on RippleNet, and you give me a quote. You say, I can give you those 53 Mexican pesos for $22. I'm like, cool, I'll take that. And so that's how it's here. So at the bottom, you have the sort of cryptocurrency plumbing. In the middle, you might have the XRapid customer. They might just be trading on their own book. If they're a remittance company, they're trading for their own customers, and that's fine. But they can also resell that capability on RippleNet so that entities that can't establish exchange relationships or can't hold a cryptocurrency even for 2 minutes can still use it. Now, in that transaction, you're buying XRP and selling it within a minute or two. The volatility of XRP in 2 minutes is better than the volatility of Mexican pesos over a couple hours. So the volatility is kind of lost in the noise. It also helps you as often as it hurts you. So it's not. For some customers who are really worried about that, like we'll agree to take their losses in exchange for their profits, and it's like they never get any money from us, and they're like, why are we giving you these profits? Like,
So then, given that, then how much does Ripple care really if somebody's integrated directly through Ripple versus somebody else, like say Corda Southern? Do you care at all? I mean, in the end, all you're hoping for is the usage and network effect, right? So where it comes in, regardless of maybe an integration contract that you have, does it really matter that much to you guys?
not that much. One of the major things that we want is more liquidity moving through cryptocurrency markets. So what's happening today is there's lots of liquidity in moving the money in cryptocurrency markets, but what it is it's speculators trading against market makers, and that doesn't make a healthy economy because the speculator is always trying to like beat the market maker. So I see XRP go up, and I try to take all your XRP a millisecond faster than. So how do you protect yourself against that? You make really small offers with really big spreads. Now, if most of the people who are taking your offers just needed to make a payment, they're not trying to trade against you, you'll make more money. So you'll make bigger offers with a tighter spread, or if you're making lots of money, I'm going to come in and make a little bit less, right? So we need to fix like the cryptocurrency liquidity problem, we need to bring market takers who are not speculators to the party. And if we do that ourselves, that's great. If somebody else wants to do that without us having to, that's great. Like if you want to solve the problem, we just need that problem solved. We need the ecosystem to have better liquidity so people can use cryptocurrencies. Today, you can use them in cases where the existing system is really bad. Like US to Mexico is pretty bad. But US to Europe is great. Like they're not cost effective because the spreads are too big, the liquidity is too thin. So yeah, if someone wants to do it some other way, we're perfectly happy. We do these things because we need them, right? Not necessarily because we think that that's where you're going to make a whole bunch of money, or it's not like our business strategy to own those parts.
And then therefore, I guess behind regulatory clarity is just liquidity. That's the biggest kind of driver of the need.
Yeah, and I would say one other thing which is closely related is it's very difficult for conventional companies to like dip their toes into the cryptocurrency space because banks will cut them off and they'll run into other problems. Regulatory clarity is even worse. Like I would say number one is regulatory clarity. Just what we don't know is legal. It's not bad laws. It's just we don't know what the law is or how it applies. And then liquidity, and then this inability for people who might want to solve some of those problems, but then they find that they'll get cut off from their existing banks. So they discover that their contracts with their existing banks actually have a clause that says they can't touch cryptocurrencies. Like we found that happen. So those are kind of the obstacles. If other people want to work on those obstacles, that's great. That's just one less thing we have to do to be successful. I'm happy with that.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your question. Go ahead.
I guess that's a good segue into what I want to ask. The SEC tweeted that they are putting cryptocurrency prevention at the forefront of their interest for this year. Assuming that everything is settled by the end of this year, how will that affect Ripple adoption within the United States?
It's really hard to say how much of an effect that's having. I thought initially that it was having a lot of effect because people were afraid that like the SEC was just going to do something drastic in the short term. I think now it's very hard to say. I would say that the benefits of any kind of regulatory clarity, even if they're no, you can't do that, I think that's probably better than like, yeah, maybe you could. It's kind of in a funny situation because we've been completely transparent about everything we've been doing since day one. We meet with regulators all the time. It seems kind of strange that they would say after 7 years, everything that you've been doing since day one is violating this fundamental law that everybody knows in this clear and obvious way. That seems like a really strange thing to have happen. On the other hand, it seems strange that they would say like everybody's fine with everything they're doing too. So what lines are they going to? And there's no obvious set of lines. So it's going to be. I'm interested to see. Obviously, we're engaging with regulators around the world, including the SEC, and we're trying to make the case for them trying to prevent like outright scams without squashing innovation. It's challenging. I wish I could just tell them, this is the rule that you should adopt. This is a clear rule. It sorts the good guys from the bad guys. Just pass this law. I have not seen that rule yet, so I think it's going to have to be squishy. Which is
You have time for maybe one or two more questions, if there are any. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, you mentioned being able to send and receive US dollars on the Ripple ledger. Do I need XRP to settle those transactions, or I guess Ripple, is it more of a payment system or a cryptocurrency?
You just need XRP to pay the transaction fees, which are some some microscopic amount. You can use an account on the XRP ledger completely to transact in other currencies and issued assets and essentially these IOUs. And in the early days, that was kind of the business use case that Ripple as a company was pushing. that has not really caught on, and so we've kind of, but I still think it's incredibly cool. Since I have an opportunity to make one of the cases, Ryan Fugger is the guy who originally came up with that idea in the original Ripple Pay, and he had this idea that instead of currencies being issued by a government and by a central party, he had this idea that like, I help you move, and you decide you owe me $50. And instead of you settling that, what happens is we track this obligation. Like, you have a positive $50 obligation, I have a minus 50, or the other way, depending on who helps you. And that could be currency, we could trade that as currency. And people who, you can have these sort of central hubs that lots of people want to owe them money because they have a store or something. And like these IOUs could trade as currency. We build that into the ledger, and I still think that's super cool. And yeah, I would encourage you to find out more about it and learn to use it and see how incredibly cool it is. Because I tell you a lot of times, I'm like, oh gosh, that's so cool. I had no idea. I saw one chart that listed all these different ledgers, and under XRP ledger, under decentralized exchange, there wasn't a checkbox. Go to the first decentralized exchange in 2012. That's one of the cool things. Obviously, we're not getting the word out.
One more question. Go ahead, please.
Is there plans for a pool of XRP to be built for customers to pull from and be fed from other sources? And was there any point to like the trademark of X-Pool?
So first of all, I'm definitely not allowed to say anything about X-Pool. But yeah, there definitely is this idea. So we really don't want to be in the business of like providing XRP to people for transactions, because our whole point is to grow the ecosystem. And like if people are just, and then that becomes a sale from our point of view. And so then if we don't want to sell XRP, we want to buy it back somewhere, which is, it's a little awkward for us to be trading on both sides of the market just from a sort of regular, just from like squeaky clean hands. It's like, oh yeah, we're selling XRP over here, we're buying it over here, we have all this inside information that you might think has something to do with the price. Like that looks ugly. And so we don't want to do that unless we have to. What we would prefer to do is partner with exchanges or partner with somebody else. And we've done that. So we have like XRapid preferred partners who we have agreements with to make sure that they meet certain service level agreements. Yeah, it's awkward for us to do that. We've thought about things like that where we couldn't find other solutions. And to date, we've been able to find other solutions in most of the places where we have that issue. So we want people buying on the, if you're buying to make a transaction, we want you buying, we really want you buying on the open market. Because otherwise we're basically, if we discount it to you, we're basically just giving you money, which like we wanted to give you money, we need to create this contrived way to do it. So, and we want to make sure that we're proving the actual use case. So like, sure, you would love to make payments with XRP if you could get XRP at a discount. Like if you could get dollars at a discount, right? You do great in the payment business. Like that doesn't prove, that just proves that if you pay people to do something, they'll do it, which is non-controversial, right? Like, yeah, it can interfere with making sure that you actually have a fit, and we don't want people to sort of be paid to suffer using a product that doesn't work for them. So you're going to be really careful that boundary between incentivizing people to participate and fooling yourself into thinking that you're getting traction.
Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your questions. Thank you, David, for coming, and thank you for taking the time.
I just want to add that if you're an undergrad interested in blockchain, obviously there's a group that is at Texas that's involved with blockchain, the Blockchain Initiative. And if you're a graduate student, there's obviously a graduate student group here at my it's headed by some MBAs. But there are groups involved, and we're starting to do more research and fund more research. So if you have interest, please be aware that those will be posted on our Blockchain Initiative website, and there'll be more of them. So